Hey, this is Mrs. Reichelt, and we're moving into the protection of the central nervous system. So this video really talks about all the ways that your brain is protected, starting with the scalp, which is the outermost part, and the skin. So just deep to the scalp and skin are the skull and the vertebral column, also act as protection. Then you have a layer called the menenges, and we'll actually talk about each of these in more detail, so this is just each of the 5. Cerebrospinal fluid also acts as a protection, and then the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to color. Each of these should be a different color, and then you did color the gyrus and the sulcus the same. You need to color that the same color as you colored a couple of pages ago in your study guide. So all of that should be the same color. I gave you a little handout of what we should have. So you start with the scalp, and then you get down to the skull. You get a bunch of other things. So just make sure that you go through that. We have a bone layer. Okay, we have all sorts of layers, and we're going to talk about them in detail right now. So meninges, we're going to skip, actually I should tell you, we went through scalp and skin. We're going to skip that, okay? We're also going to skip the skull, okay, or the bone, because we already talked about each of those in other chapters. So we're moving right into the third one we talked about, which is the meninges. Now, these are connective tissue coverings, and the reason there was a bunch of different colors and maybe some words that we didn't recognize, or the meninges are actually made out of a couple different layers. So the dura mater, okay, dura mater is a double-layered external covering. It's consists of periosteum or periosteum, which is attached to the inner surface of the skull. So remember, this is the layer when we looked at the bone system or the skeletal system in chapter 5. This is what was connecting part of their bone to surrounding tissue. So this is attached to that inner surface of the skull. Then you have the meningeal layer, which is the outermost covering of the brain. Okay, then we have the arachnoid layer, and the arachnoid layer is named because it looks web-like. Okay, it's the middle layer. Then we have the pia mater, which is the innermost layer, and it clings to the surface of the brain. Next up, we have the cerebrospinal fluid. Now, the cerebrospinal fluid is similar to blood plasma composition. It's formed by the choroid plexus, which we talked about last video, I believe. And then this also forms a watery cushion to protect around the brain. And it's circulated in the arachnoid space, the ventricles, and the central canal of the spinal cord. So basically that the cerebrospinal fluid is going to circulate all over the entire brain, including the spinal cord. And then the ventricles, are the location, I don't know why it says and, the ventricles are the location of cerebrospinal fluid as well. And then the last thing that we're really going to cover is the blood-brain barrier. So basically your blood includes the least permeable capillaries of the body. So that means that things don't get into the blood or into the brain very easily because it's the least permeable area. Okay, so they're bound by tight junctions, and unfortunately this excludes many potentially harmful substances. Those includes fats, fat-soluble molecules, respiratory gases, although it's beneficial that oxygen's able to get there. It excludes alcohol, nicotine, and anesthesia. So that wraps up the protection of the central nervous system.